Hey, everybody. Hey, if you're joining us online, thanks for being here. My name's Sean, and I'm one of the pastors around here, and I am so glad that you are here today because we're going to kick off a brand new series, and the beginning and ending of series is like my favorite thing. I just love it. So get to share some new ideas and things and some old ideas. But before I get into the message, did you appreciate the worship team over here? And Bryn, one of our middle school students, rocking it. Lindsay, a mom with 3 little kids, and she's here early to rehearse, and that's a big deal. So, man, I'm so thankful for our volunteers and everything. And we have lots of them, and they're you. So way to go. I also got to start working out again after 3.5 months. My doctor cleared me, and I'm super sore right now. Like seriously, you get back in there and, oh man, it takes you longer every single time to get back in shape, doesn't it? What is happening? I'm getting old, I don't know. But glad to be here, and I want to tell you another story. I know I've done a few of these, but I have to tell you this story from the Philippines in 1989. A good buddy of mine who is like a 6'5", big guy, basketball player. We were in the Philippines, and we were really working with college students and doing something different than sports, but we had a few games that summer, and so we traveled 3 hours to go to the University of the Philippines and play a basketball game. And people went crazy, and the stands were filled, and it was one of those games where you could feel the electricity. And the team was good. So did I lose one game? I think I've lost one game overseas, and that's it. We traveled with some really good teams over the years. We had the starting guard from Stanford one year, and we had the starting center from San Jose State, and just all these amazing athletes. And this particular trip, in this particular game, I sprained my ankle really bad. And so we wrapped it up, and I kept playing, and I'm limping. I'm like, this is so fun, but my body was I could feel like something was going wrong with my body. And we get to the end of the game, and it's 145 to 145. And then what the home team did, the university guys, they unplugged the scoreboard and said, it's over, we're going to tie. It's the only basketball game I've ever tied in my life. And so we walked out of there, and it was pouring rain. And my buddy Farnham, who's the big 6'5" guy, he and I had to walk to a bus stop. And when it's raining in the Philippines, it's a nightmare to catch public transportation. And we had a 3-hour ride back to where we were staying. And I started feeling my body was aching and falling apart. And I'm like, dude, I'm getting sick. Something's wrong. And my ankle is just wah, wah. There's no ice to put on my ankle. And it's pouring, and so every time a bus comes by, everybody just it's crazy. It's like trying to rush the stage at a concert, like a rock concert or something, and people are pushing and shoving. And every bus that comes by, there might be 1 or 2 seats or no seats, so everybody pushes and shoves, and then the bus just keeps going. So we're there for 3 hours. And at this point, I can tell I have a fever, and I'm like, dude, I cannot run. I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to have to call somebody or something. He's like, no, dude, I'm going to take care of us. And so this bus finally came by with nobody on it, completely empty. And everybody sees it, and you can hear the screams go up there were probably 200 or 300 people that are standing around. And this bus probably could hold 30 maybe. And so we see it, and it comes, and then my buddy Farnham starts to run, and he's pushing people out of the way, and he gets to the bus, and he holds onto the handles on each side of the door, and he barricades himself like this, like he's blocking people out, like in basketball. And he's like, come on, Sean, come on. And people are pressing in on him. Sweet little old ladies are pressing in on him, and they're getting angry, on his own. And I make it through the crowd somehow. I go under his arm. I get on the bus. I'm the first one there. I sit down, and I'm breathing really hard. I'm sweating and everything. And then I look at him, and he's still barricading, and they're starting to climb and yell. And so he just gives them one big push. And I see all these sweet old people, they're just all falling backwards. And then he jumps on, and then, man, it was chaos after that. And that bus filled up. It was crazy. And 3-hour ride home. I went in, I laid down, 2 weeks, high fever. That's when I lost the 20 pounds that I didn't have back then. So there's this saying in the Philippines, which is really interesting because they live this out. And the saying is that there's always room for one more. Isn't that great? I've been on crowded jeepneys before where people are hanging off the back. I've been one of those people. I've ridden on the roof of a jeepney before. And I've sat on them in the seats, and I'll see, again, I know I'm saying little old ladies a lot, but there's a lot of them, and they're traveling, and they're getting onto these Jeeps. And I can tell there's no seat. You cannot see the seat. And everybody's kind of staggered, like one sits forward, one sits back, one sits forward to fit more people. And I've had these sweet gals come in and sit right on my lap, like there's room for one more. It's okay, somehow we're gonna like lean or whatever. There's always room for one more. I wonder what life would be like if we lived like that. If we treated our whole life like that, there's always room for another person. We're beginning a series today called Belong, Creating Space for Everyone. And really what we're going to do is we're going to talk about just one part of one of our strategic anchors. And if you don't know what that means, you can go back and listen to the series that we did before the Big Blessed, which was all about kind of our strategy and everything like that. But we want to give people an opportunity to belong because Jesus made space for everyone. Somehow, he made space for everyone. Everyone that wanted space with him could get space with him. Not everybody did. And so I just think we should live more like Jesus. We should live our lives in a way where we look at others and we wonder, is there space for them? In my group, in my friendships, in my home. And there's different types of space. There's actually these 4 different types of spaces that we're going to go over, and we're going to kind of talk about how do we interact in those different spaces. Like one of them, we feel a camaraderie with others. It's like a big, giant public space, like at a 49er game. You know, and everybody's there, and everybody like senses that they belong. You know, and you do if you're rooting for your team and everybody's high-fiving. I was at a Denver Nuggets game sitting like right on second row, almost on the floor, and Tim Hardaway, he's an old player, like he hit this 3-point shot to tie it up, and I was high-fiving with people I don't even know. And this one guy spilled his popcorn all over me, and he just gives me this big hug. Like, and we belong together. And then there's all the way the other extreme where like you belong with someone. You know, don't you want this to be true about your life? I do. And that's a different type of space. It's not a public space. It's something much more intimate. And so there's this book that you might want to check out. It's called The Search to Belong by Joseph Myers, and he talks about these different spaces. And we want to examine those and just say we offer opportunities to belong. And there's 4 different spaces. There's a public space. And go to that next slide. There's a public space, there's a social space, there's a personal space, and an intimate space. And you have all of these spaces in your life. And there's different numbers. The numbers are debatable. People debate about how many people make a certain type of a space. But then there's these different things that we practice, like we practice all these different things, which I cannot see them right now. Oh, visibility. So yeah. So we go out in public, right? I mean, if we never go out in public, we don't experience these large times with other human beings. Social space, availability. Like, do you go to the activities, the parties? You know, do you have people at your house? Personal space, accountability, again, that word sometimes rubs me the wrong way, but it's maybe 5 to 12 people. This is your oikos that we talk about, those people in your life where you are doing life with your friendships. And then, of course, there's vulnerability in the intimate space. And that's, when we get to that one, we'll talk about how difficult vulnerability is. Because people talk about it all the time, but there are people that do their whole life, and they mostly keep people out. They learn how to get around it with fancy language, and if they're a Christian, then they put spiritual language on it to kind of cover up the spiritual cloaking. But we are made to open up and to be vulnerable and to see one another in that small space. And not everybody in your life belongs in every single one of these spaces, right? I mean, you start to have to ask yourself, who gets to be in this space? And so when you come to our worship gatherings in this room right now, this is a public space. But when you go to the lobby, and that lobby is really tiny, and lobbies sometimes need to get bigger, and then we call them a narthex or whatever, but when you get into there, that's more like a social space. Social space is when you kind of start to lean in, and you have your food or your coffee, and you're talking to people, and there might be some music, like at a party or something like that, and you kind of lean in. And so there's these different types of spaces. How do we live in such a way that there's always room for one more? Always room for one more. At the beginning of the scriptures, beginning of the Bible, there's only one thing in Genesis 1 and 2 that's not good. Everything else is good. It is good. It is good. It is good. It is good. There's only one thing that's not good, and that is aloneness. It is not good for the human, and the word Adam right there, Adam, it means humanity, it means human. It is not good for the human to be alone. And aloneness is different than loneliness. We all experience loneliness at times. We can have people that are really in our lives and they're loving us and all of that, and we feel this sense of aloneness maybe because we're different or we're struggling with something that week, that month, that year, and there's this sense of maybe isolation or whatever. But aloneness is detrimental to human beings. This is like you're starving for connection, and for some reason you can't get it. That's not good. That's not good at all. And so God makes the Ezer, right? The Ezer, and there's this connection, and we've talked about the Ezer. Most of the time when the Bible says Ezer, it's referring to God. And so this is not a comment on current social views on gender and that sort of stuff, but we need to read more deeply than just seeing two different genders. We need to read more deeply and go, what's really going on here for humanity? So I'm not commenting on current social stuff. Don't send me an email. What I'm commenting on is the fact that humanity was never designed to be alone. Often what I will say is isolation will kill you. Solitude will revive you so that you can help others belong when you come back to your community. We all need solitude. Isolation, not so much. So humans need connection, but humans are masters at exclusion. Have you noticed this? We're great at excluding. Have you talked to any high school students recently? Do you remember your own high school years recently? But here's the thing. You grow up and you become adults, and you're really good at it as adults. You really are. No, you can't come to this, or no, we already have a foursome out on the golf course. There's no room for you, or whatever, whatever it might be. We are masters at pushing people out. And when we add all of the crazy stuff from our culture, political views, social views, religious views, any of that stuff, the exclusion just grows and grows and grows. And you can be at Thanksgiving dinner and be alone. So what do we do about this? Well, Jesus is amazing. So let's look at Jesus, and let's look at a story, an interaction. And this is actually one of the first stories that I ever read in the Bible, 30, I don't know how many years ago, 35 or whatever. And it's a simple interaction. Jesus has just finished the Sermon on the Mount. Everybody's blown away. That was a public space. Everybody's invited. And he rocks their world. And then he comes down from the mountain, and then there's this interaction. Here's what it says in Matthew 8. When Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." And I know you can't read the scribbling up there, but I just thought that's a really cool image. In the midst of a public space, there's this moment of intimacy. Jesus sees the one in the midst of everybody. And when you're going through something in the midst of everybody, Jesus sees the one. He sees you. Have you ever prayed that before? If you're willing, are you willing, God? Sometimes I don't know if God's so willing. I mean, just to be honest, because I'm like, well, you're not showing up for me the way I want you to show up for me right now. If you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said. Be clean. Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, and this is really important part of the story, see that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them. So imagine yourself at home with your family. Imagine yourself at home with your family like when your kids were like teenagers or they were elementary school. Imagine you're at home with your family and there's just that richness and beauty of relationship. Like whatever's going on that day, it's clicking. Like you can really get really mad at your family, but it's clicking on that day. And there's this depth that you are feeling. And imagine now, and no matter who you are in life, imagine that you're the one who looks at your hand and you see a white spot on your hand. And you don't tell anybody, but you're nervous. You're really nervous. Today, you see that white spot has spread. And then it spreads a little bit more. And now you can't hide it. You can't hide it from your family, and they sort of freak out, and they know what's going to happen. They know the implications, and so you go to the priest. And the priests were like these experts at noticing what kind of skin disease this might have been. And they determined, yes, this skin disease is contagious. You need to go away. And they determined that you are unclean. Doesn't mean you're sinful. It means you are not able to be in the kind of community that you were designed for, because this disease is going to spread somehow. And even if the disease wasn't a contagious disease, like back then, like still the same thing. This is the ancient world. And so imagine walking away from your family. I mean, the lonely road that you just start to leave, like you're saying goodbye. You can't even hug your kiddos. You're weeping, they're weeping, and you're going off. You're going out of the city. You're going over somewhere else, out into a desolate place. Aloneness. Now, where do you belong? You might not have leprosy or an ancient skin disease or anything wrong with you, but this image, you may have felt this before. You may have felt this because somebody else left you. You had connection and they left, and now you're experiencing intense loneliness, intense aloneness. That deep, vulnerable connection is gone. What do you do? How do we respond as the church? This sounds so easy, right? I mean, connection. We're made for connection. We're made for relationship. Like somebody have a party and invite everybody. And it sounds so easy, but we know human relationships are complex. They're difficult. And we believe that everybody belongs, but there's so much exclusion that goes on, even in the church. The music and preaching isn't to my liking. The youth ministry is too big. Wait, it's too small. I can't find my child's room. Traffic getting into your parking lot was frustrating. The coffee wasn't ready. I didn't like the coffee. The coffee was too hot. It was too cold. People have opinions about coffee. No one greeted me. Too many people greeted me. I want some anonymity. Leave me alone for a little bit. The building is too old. It's too new. It's too hot. It's too cold. The music is too loud. It's too old-fashioned. It's too, you fill in the blank. Right? The sermon was too long. Okay, I've heard that before. It was uninspiring. It was too challenging. It was too political. It wasn't political enough. It didn't address real problems. It didn't address my problems. It made me feel weird. It made me feel guilty, whatever it might be. It catered too much to Christians. It catered too much to people who have yet to follow Jesus. It was for old people. It was for young people. It was to you fill in the blank. We get the point? The reality is that creating community for everyone, especially in a public setting, is really, really difficult. It's really difficult. And so a public space, again, is kind of where everyone can find their place. And so, again, we go back to like a big sporting event, like a big football game. And this is Levi Stadium, but it's not a football game because all those people are Swifties. Yeah, like everybody feels like they belong. If you haven't been to a big event, it's amazing. It's an emotional feeling for that many people to be singing in one direction. So when you guys sang this morning, and Lindsay pulled the mic away, and you were singing, I got chills. We're all participating in this thing. There's a sense of connection and belonging. And that's what we want at Saratoga Federated Church for every single person that comes into one of our worship gatherings. And that's sort of what I want you thinking about a little bit. Like, think of all of life, but think about our worship gatherings and why we do what we do the way that we do it. One of our goals is we want everybody to experience belonging. Now, there's a lot of churches, a lot of styles of singing, and so everybody kind of needs to search and find their niche and their people. But we don't want people to feel like they can't belong here. Like they can't find connection. And it's a two-way street, but here's the thing that we're doing. When we are talking about being ready for people to belong to us, what we're saying to them is, we were expecting you. You ever show up early at somebody's house and they didn't know you were going to get there yet, and their hair's all in the rollers, or that's kind of old-fashioned or whatever. The house is a mess, and wait a minute, let me clean up. You know, they were expecting you, just not yet. But when you come into a place where they were expecting you, then it's like, oh man, here's a great chair to sit in. Here's a great drink, whatever it might be. Years ago, in the late 90s, I was serving in a church here in the Valley, and I was there for 2 years. After about 9 months, I knew that I was in the wrong place. And the reason I knew that is because I went to this church to build a college and young adult ministry, something I had already done at another church. And there weren't any college and young adults at the church. Maybe there were like 2 or 3 or 5. And so after 2 months, we had 60, and then we had 70. And we took this little room and we did stuff like we did in here. We put some lights up and we did some different things. It was a little more casual. Like we had some couches and, tables, and it was very eclectic, and it was kind of the thing to do. It was Gen X ministry back then. And so it was really, really fun. And I was talking one day about this idea of belonging, and I was using the word hospitality. And after the service, I walked outside and I was saying hi to people. These 4 young adult women came over to me, and they didn't look happy at all. 2 of them came from a church that has a university in Southern California, which I will not mention, but neither has a lot of grace. And usually people that come out of there kind of are pretty legalistic and angry. And so I sort of had this, I was kind of like not sure what they were going to do. And one girl comes up to me and she points her finger in my face and says, "The gospel is not comfortable." I didn't talk about the gospel tonight, really. I mean, I talked about something else that weaves into the gospel, and I said, okay, the gospel sometimes isn't very comfortable. But I wasn't talking about that. What I was talking about is hospitality. And last time I checked, there's a debate over this, however you read Romans chapter 12. Hospitality, many people believe, is a spiritual gift. But whether it is or not, some of you are designed to be hospitable, and you are brilliant. And then I said, also, hospitality is a qualification to be an elder in the church, to be a leader in the church. You have to be hospitable. And they kind of stared at me, and they weren't buying it. And I said, well, imagine this. So you invite me to your house for dinner, and I show up. Where do you have me sit? On the floor? In the worst, most uncomfortable chair that you have? Or do you give me like the best seat in the house? What's the temperature in the room? Like right now it's kind of hot in here. But what's all of that stuff. What are you cooking? Are you going to throw a piece of bologna at me? Or are you making the meal with care and touch and love? And like, what are you serving to drink? Is it something that I like? Or is it something that just you like? You see how this works? And we can kind of play this out. And I said to these gals, I said, all I'm talking about is the art of hospitality. Because you have to remember how scary it is and how uncomfortable it is to walk into a church for most people. For most people that have left the church or are just never been a part of it, it's extremely difficult. And so we have to work hard on this "we were expecting you" thing, this hospitality thing. And I have to admit, I'm not very good at it. Over the last several years, one of the things that's happened in my life, and one of the things I've discovered through therapy and spiritual direction, is that I've always sort of been an introvert that's kind of right next to the extroverted line. Like I'm right on the line. So I had a lot of, like there's fun Sean, extroverted Sean. But over the last 10 years, I've noticed that I've drifted to the point where I'm way over here on the introverted side, to the point actually where I don't want to have people over. I don't want to have a party. I'm too tired, or whatever it might be. And so one of the things that I'm learning to address is, oh wow, I gotta bring that back over and be the Sean that I've really been for most of my life, which is introverted, but not that introverted. So where are you at with all the hospitality thing? Where are you at with making room for one more? I'm going to give you a question. We're going to do this really quick, but this is what we do in this gathering sometimes, and we haven't done it enough. So I'm going to give you one question. It's going to be 3 minutes. You're going to have to go fast. So you're going to turn to the people, and let's put that question up. What's important in your mind? So this is your own opinion. It's not like there's a right or wrong answer when it comes to creating space for people to belong. And I want you to think about Saratoga Federated Church. This is the context. So for this church, what's important in your mind when it comes to creating space for people to belong? Okay? And so you're going to go, you can bring up the lights a little bit and people can turn to each other, and we're going to take 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes, and just talk about that right now. Ready? Go. right, hey, let's bring it back. And we have a couple of roving microphones, a couple of Vanna Whites. I think I'm dating myself again. And I'd like to hear what you guys said in your group. So raise your hand, and we'll get you a microphone. We want to hear what you said in your group. A few comments. How'd you answer this question? Or you can answer what somebody else said, out them.
What is important for people to belong? What is important?
The atmosphere.
There it is.
Yeah, atmosphere is a big deal, isn't it? Absolutely. All right, over here with Savoy.
Okay, we came up with 6 things. Should I just say one?
Wow, 6 things. Why don't you give us 2? The 2
Okay.
most important in your mind.
Let's see. Be curious about their story.
Ooh, very good.
And let's see. Let's see. When they're a newcomer, describe yourself as somebody who's been here for a while and ask what they would like to know.
Oh, great, yeah. So really questions that require more than just a yes or no answer, right? And you're showing interest in the other person's story. That's awesome. Someone else.
Smiling.
Smile. Yes. Yes, those sour Christians, The gospel's not comfortable. Well, neither are you, so I don't know. Someone else.
Not to get too wrapped up in your own clique, but keep your eyes up, look around. Someone might want to just connect with you that you don't know about.
That's awesome. It's easy to settle in when you have a smaller group of friends, and I know how that is. It feels so good. And then we have to remember people don't have that. How open are we to making room for one more? Good.
If you
Thanks,
see someone that you had invited and they look very awkward, you go over to them and you grab them by their hand and tell them, I am so glad you're here. I was afraid you weren't going to come.
And you two are good at that. By the way, I need my hug today, so we'll talk later. Some people have the spiritual gift of awkwardness, don't they? Just get over it. Plow through that, because it's really about welcoming the other. A couple more.
I would say acceptance as they are, and maybe a good morning get some acknowledgement of that person.
Yeah.
Regardless of what happened that morning, that week, their life, just acceptance.
Acknowledging, yeah, that's great. Noticing. That's a big deal. Yeah.
Well, 2 things. Maybe some people don't want to be approached if they're new, but if they're on the side of approaching,
Yeah.
I think they can indicate, if they don't want to engage that
Yeah.
much. And I also feel the food needs to be more inclusive.
All right. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute, so just wait for it. Okay.
You mean baklava, right? We can have. That's my favorite. I'm putting a vote out for that.
I love this quote by Tolkien. A lot of you know him and his friendship with C.S. Lewis and all that. He said, we all long for Eden and are constantly glimpsing it. There's so much truth in that. There's this hunger for a place where there's wholeness, where we don't have to long for something, where we feel that deep acceptance and love. We all long for Eden and are constantly glimpsing it. Our whole nature is soaked with a sense of exile. Exile is a major motif in the scriptures, Old and New Testament. To be exiled is to feel that separation from where you belong. And whenever a relationship breaks, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a parent-child, whether it's in a community like this, and you feel that separation, there's deep, deep pain in that experience. Because we weren't made for that. We weren't made for connection to be broken apart. We were made for connection to be more intimate, more stable, more transformational. We all long for Eden, but we live oftentimes with a sense of exile. And so we may think that things like food and coffee and that sort of stuff aren't that big of a deal, but everything plays a little part, and actually there's quite a big deal about how we practice hospitality here. And so I want to bring up 3 of my friends to come up and a few questions. So guys, come up, and band, come up, and we'll finish with this. And so we have a hospitality team here at Saratoga Federated Church, and Pastor Sally has been like carrying this for a while. And as we get to the end of this year, things are being transferred over onto Kyle, and so pray for his soul. Come on up, guys. Do you need a microphone? Grab one of these. Here we go. Glenn, Don, and AJ, and I'm going to start with Don, and these guys are making the magic happen here at the 9:30. So Don, first of all, I keep hearing about these wonderful things that you're making just over and over and over every week. And my mother-in-law, who's back there, is often telling me, let's get there early so I can get one, And so what do you guys do?
So usually we're here pretty early. Glenn gets here early. He sets up the coffee, searches for the finest coffee beans, grinds them, and then he has his pour-over contraction, which is ingenious. Pouring fresh coffee, hot coffee. Where are you going to get that? Where are you going to? AJ gets here really early. He sets up. He fills in for Glenn. He pours coffee. You'll see him running to Safeway before church is starting, getting supplies that we need, making sure everything runs good. And whenever we have like a church buffet, AJ is cooking like that. I am getting here early. I'm in the kitchen sometimes baking some scones, or the night before I'll bake some things. There's chocolate zucchini bread out there that I made. So that's a lot of fun. But I'll tell you a quick story. Last Father's Day, Sally gets a whole bunch of bacon. AJ gets in the kitchen, cooks up all the bacon. We got chocolate-covered bacon. Glenn's pouring gourmet coffee. I bring in some banana bread, and there's donuts, and there's this big spread there. So Kyle's daughter, Indy, gets up there, and she sees this spread and goes, I love coming to church.
Yeah.
It was so sweet.
Food is the way to someone's heart. Absolutely. AJ, let me ask you a question. Why? So this is the what, but why do you do this stuff?
Well, this was easy for me because I've been in the hospitality industry for over 30 years, since I've been, almost 40 years now. I work in hospitality during the week, and I wanted to find a way that I could be involved and give to the church. And Serve Sunday was where I started, and I love Serve Sunday so much. And then we had a men's group that we would go to serve the homeless on Saturday mornings, cook breakfast down at the Salvation Army. And during COVID, that kind of stopped. And when Glenn started talking about the coffee program, I wanted to be involved. I mean, I lead a team during the week. I wanted to be behind the scenes, but just be of support. So I do this because it comes easy for me, and I wanted to support Glenn and his coffee program.
Yeah, it's a gift, man. You are gifted. Thank you so much. So Glenn, last question here. What would you say to all these folks, especially if there's anybody here today that is feeling alone or feeling disconnected when it comes to the hospitality ministry?
So I want to, like an example, actually is Don. He just showed up one time with zucchini bread or something and just dropped it off at the table in the front of the church, and he didn't ask, he just dropped it off, and that was so cool because everybody's like, wow, that's something neat. But I would say, I mean, for me, I have lots of ideas, probably too many sometimes, my wife would think, but I sometimes, like, I get an idea and I want to do it, and then all of a sudden I talk myself out of it, and part of it I think is just being afraid of like not getting the response that I want or something like that. But as I've gotten older, I think the last 2 or 3 years, I just am not afraid of like looking stupid, or I don't know. I mean, I thought I was, he knows. But I used to think like, I might get, I don't worry about that anymore. And if, and so I kept thinking about like what can I do to make it more comfortable for people here that are coming in? Because this church, you guys, so many of you guys, have blessed me so much. And I come here, and it's great. And I don't get to see everybody that I want to see. And I can't do it all. But I know that we know that there's people that are not, they come here, and they don't have that warm, fuzzy feeling that you get from being here for 23 years and just having connections with people. So I was just hoping that it would help somebody come back and ultimately get to know their Creator better and know the love of God. And it sounds silly to think it's from coffee, but if that helps.
No, absolutely.
My wife had me take this test, a love language. What's your love language? And mine came up as acts of service, ironically. And I think that's equal for the three of us up here. I think that's our love language. That's how we want to show that we care, by giving back and serving.
Awesome. Hey, would you appreciate these guys one more time? Thank you. One of the best ways to achieve connection when you feel disconnected is to serve with others. And actually, serving others, giving your life away, also does magic for your soul, right? Because some of us are walking around with wounded souls these days, wounded hearts. And there's something about, we got to deal with that, but there's something about giving ourselves away in service and using our gifts that helps to heal that. So if you're disconnected, if you're disjointed, join our hospitality team. And that's not a pitch, just, let's get more volunteers. That's actually, I think, a healing exercise for us. Find a place and serve and find community. Let's stand and sing a worship song as we close.